Hi everyone, it's Emily, and it's been about 6 months since the Nintendo Switch 2 released, and in that time, I still have not picked up the system. So today I'm going to share whether or not I regret not picking up the Switch 2 sooner, and what my plans are moving forward. Do I have any plans on picking it up this holiday season, next year, or have I decided to just forego it and not pick up the Switch 2 at all? I think there are a lot of things to consider when it comes to, purchasing any console, but these last 6 months, I would say the gaming landscape has somewhat shifted when it comes to the pricing of games, what's being released, and also kind of expectations for hardware prices, because we've been having a lot of people indicating that the console prices as well as PC parts are only going to rise more in the next year. And I think a lot of people are, greatly considering whether or not now is the time to buy Switch 2 if they haven't already. So I wanted to touch upon a lot of those topics in today's video and just make an update of whether or not I think the Switch 2 is kind of worth it for me or not. One of the primary drivers for picking up a brand new console system are often the exclusive games. And the Switch 2 these past 6 months have released 4 different exclusive titles, namely Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Age of Imprisonment, and Kirby Air Riders. And I think overall Nintendo has done a good job at, diversifying the first-party IPs that are, coming out with exclusive titles and games for the system to incentivize people to pick it up sooner rather than later. And they've also hinted at some other first-party IPs to look forward to in the coming year. Further incentive of why you should pick up the system now, so you can enjoy those games when they do release eventually. I think individually speaking, these games are fun. However, I kind of still question whether or not these were really good exclusive titles to launch the Switch 2 with at this time. Mostly because I think we can't help but compare to what happened with the Switch 1 launch with Breath of the Wild. And that was a game that people could just lose themselves in for months and months and, discover new things and, still engage with the said game. When it comes to Mario Kart World, I hear some of the kind of things they've changed when it comes to, queuing up, doing all the different races and how you pick things have made it a little bit less fun for people just to play all the time. Just keep kind of repeating the same maps and things in Mario Kart World. Similarly with Donkey Kong Bonanza, I hear a lot of people love that game and that it's really kind of innovative for the platformer genre from Nintendo. However, I feel like once you beat the game, it's hard to, keep playing it. So it has a very short window of enjoyment, if you will. Same kind of with the new Hyrule Warriors or Age of Imprisonment Zelda game. While I've heard a lot of people love kind of the new direction that they're doing with Age of Imprisonment and how they've interwoven the Tears of the Kingdom story and make it somewhat canon, when people think of a brand new Zelda title that, they want to go out and buy, it's often not the Musou kind of spin-off game, even though I know this one's canon this time, but they kind of want more of that, mainline Zelda experience that will entice them to, play that single player experience for a long time, like with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild and whatnot. Finally, for Kirby Air Riders, I was able to demo that game at PAX West, and I thought it was fun, as someone who does not play kart racers, for the record. But I think, unfortunately, there's been too many comparisons of Kirby Air Riders with Mario Kart World, and maybe not enough people who are willing to, if they are playing Mario Kart World, they don't really see a reason to play Air Riders. Or I've heard there's some issues with sometimes the lobby kind of waiting for people to fill it up so they could play online, and it doesn't seem to, have as much buzz as, Mario Kart does. But when it comes to all of these exclusive games, for me personally, nothing has really enticed me to, want to go out and buy the Switch 2, which is primarily why I haven't yet. The one game that may convince me to buy Switch 2 when it comes out is the new Fire Emblem game, because I'm a big JRPG fan. I love Fire Emblem. It's one of my favorite franchises, and I'm still very intrigued by what they're doing with Fortune's Weave, but I feel like I need to hear more. Is it going to be more of a Three Houses experience or more of a kind of traditional Fire Emblem experience? So I'm personally still waiting to hear more, and also personally hearing more of what is Monolith Soft doing. I've been eagerly awaiting for their new RPG or the new Xeno game, whatever they choose to do. And still nothing yet, but I'm hopeful that eventually there'll be news and it'll give me a better idea of when I will be buying the Switch 2 in order to play that said game. So outside of the exclusive first-party games, I think the primary reason why most people who have purchased a Switch 2 system bought it is so that the Switch 1 games they may have had before run better. And this is either directly from just inserting your game into the Switch 2 and it just looks better because of the better specs of the system and, just how it's kind of emulating those games and enhancing them, or also through the upgrade paths that are either paid or free. Because you have different varieties there, depending on the game and how extensive those upgrade paths are. So for me, it sounds like if you do own a lot of Switch 1 games and you're not interested in those first-party exclusive Switch 2 games, it's probably not a bad idea if you want to get a Switch 2 just to upgrade those, but there's a caveat, I would say. Not all of the Switch 1 games have these enhancements or even run better on a Switch 2 system, at least right now. There are promises that, these upgrades are coming, but they're not always guaranteed. For me personally, the one game I really want upgraded that may convince me to buy a Switch 2 is Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I actually made a tweet about this very game back in January that if they did enhance Xenoblade Chronicles 2 on the Switch 2, it would be an instant buy for me. I would definitely be willing to shell out money for new hardware just so that that game could run beautifully. But unfortunately, that still has not happened. I think it will, but again, I'm kind of willing to wait until that does happen. So whenever I get a chance to replay that game, it'll be in all of its glory. That also leads me to a lot of the physical releases. As a big collector for physical media, you can see from the shelves behind me, I do value physical games when it comes to buying on console because I'm not really a fan of digital games on consoles that are locked to the console's library. I have a very high-end PC that runs games beautifully, and I personally would just rather buy any sort of game if it's available digitally on multiple platforms just to go with PC, just because of how it would run on there. And also I have a shared kind of family Steam library that we've had for a while that has nearly 800 games on there. So I would rather have my digital game on there rather than locked to a console where it's more difficult to share without, having a subscription service or something like that. So physical media for me is a big incentive for me to actually buy a brand new console, because I think unfortunately moving forward, there's going to eventually be a time when physical media is not going to, be available on brand new consoles. And at that point, if there's no exclusive games, like we've been kind of seeing the trend in the industry where a lot of so-called exclusives are timed exclusives and will eventually be available on multiple platforms, including PC, I would just rather, if I had to buy digital, I would go PC. That's kind of, I think, where my stance is at this moment. Luckily, that is not the case. There are plenty of true physical games available on the Switch 2, and they are growing more aplenty, if you will. However, a lot of them right now are enhancements of Switch 1 games. So you could buy the enhanced Switch 2 version on the cart, but it's just mostly an upgraded physical game, where if you already bought it on the Switch 1, either you have to re-buy it on the Switch 2 if you want, the improved version on the cart, or you just are willing to use your Switch 1 cart and hope that there's some sort of upgrade path digitally if you want those enhanced features. This is good news that we're getting more true physicals on the Switch 2. There's not too many out at this moment, but there's many that are apparently in the works that will be coming out in the coming year. But unfortunately, if you look at the proportion of true physical games that are available on the Switch 2 with the game key cards as well as the game in the box options for multiple games, it's looking a little grim when it comes to third-party developers. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of people, championing for game key cards, and that's their prerogative. Like I'm not going to shame anyone for, buying game key cards if that's how you want to consume your media. For me personally, I just don't see the point of having it on my shelf if, the data is not on the game cart. I feel the same way with, the disc-based games for the PS5 and beyond. I want the game actually on there. Otherwise, it just, I think, takes up room on my shelf. And I just don't want it hogging up, my limited space that I have on the shelves behind me. But yeah, these are kind of the primary drivers, I think, when it comes to considering whether or not the Switch 2 is worth it at this time. The exclusives, how into physical media collecting are you? Also, looking at the performance, it does seem like, some of these third-party games are not necessarily the best experience, even on a Switch 2 system, if you compare it to the PS5 or PC. Primary examples right now is probably Persona 3 Reload. Unfortunately, that is not a very good port when it comes to either the digital version or the game keycard version, which is also digital. But it doesn't run that well, unfortunately, on the system for the Switch 2 compared to where it was released prior. And right now, you could buy it a lot cheaper on the other systems it was released prior. And you get the benefit of it running better and it being cheaper. So that's kind of the unfortunate reality when it comes to some of the third-party games right now in the landscape. And we're also seeing that, not all first-party IPs are safe from the game key card situation with Pokepia, which I know is not developed by Nintendo, but it's still, a first-party Nintendo IP. It's still, I think, concerning that what could happen to, other games moving forward. And I think also being priced at $80 for that game seems a little egregious because we have been seeing, prices for a lot of games, getting more and more expensive. I know people were very angry when Mario Kart World was announced at $80 if you bought the physical edition at launch. And knowing, especially for the first party games for Nintendo, it's very rare that they have sales. And if they do have them, they're not usually super steep sales like you see for other platforms. And so having this $80 precedence for a lot of games, as well as $70, which we've been seeing also, on other consoles and elsewhere, it's just a little concerning when Nintendo is pricing them so high, but they're not going to be willing to probably lower them at, a substantial value at some point. Kind of a shame we haven't been seeing the Nintendo Select Edition kind of options that they used to do for the 3DS games, as well as the Wii U. Maybe they'll bring that back now that games are more expensive, and this is a way to make them a little bit cheaper where they don't feel like they have to, discount them heavily to make them a little bit more palatable when it comes to pricing. But I think one of the biggest concerns I've been seeing, talked about online right now in this economy is the hardware and whether or not it's better to buy a Switch 2 at the current price, or do we risk it if you want to buy it later? You might see a price hike because just a lot of electronics right now are kind of seeing a price increase. Even the PC market, RAM is gone, is it 3 times the price or maybe even 4 times the price that was thanks to, AI and all that. And just how limited a lot of these hardware, pieces are. And you factor in tariffs too, just making just things more complicated and more expensive just down the line is what it's kind of seeming like. We've been seeing other consoles increase their prices. Sony has done this, Microsoft did it. The Steam Machine hasn't at this point released what the pricing is going to be, but they're making it sound like it's not going to be priced like a console system, but more like a PC. So we're probably talking $750 and up is how expensive that particular piece of hardware is going to be. So Nintendo, they might decide to bump up their prices at some point. Right now, for the holiday sales, what I was seeing over Black Friday and Cyber Monday, I think I saw a couple of used units for the Switch 2 that, had like $125 off or something. They're very limited quantity, but, you could still find, discounts for used market consoles. And I think for brand new consoles, I was seeing some bundle deals where if you got the Mario Kart World bundle deal, the package, instead of it being $500, they knocked it down to $450. So you kind of got Mario Kart World for free digitally, if you kind of think about it that way. So I think it's really difficult sometimes to speculate, what our price is going to be like in the future, because a lot of it is just speculation and really just gambling at the end of the day. And I'm really hoping that a lot of people aren't feeling that pressure that I need to buy this now, even though maybe this purchase doesn't make sense for me right now, that they're going to do it thinking that they're saving themselves maybe 50 or more dollars, down the line, because eventually they want to get the Switch 2 maybe. They just don't need it right now. It's kind of the idea, but they're getting it now because they think it's cheaper than what it's going to be in the future. So for me, I find that not necessarily the best logic when it comes to making a purchasing decision, especially it being a little bit driven by FOMO of, like, I guess price FOMO, if you call that a thing. But yeah, something that I've been considering definitely when it comes to, as someone who definitely probably wants to pick up a Switch 2 eventually to, have my Switch 1 games enhanced at some point, as well as pick up some of the exclusives I want from Intelligent Systems and Monolith Soft, because I love their games and will definitely want them eventually, as well as the mainline Zelda games. But yeah, at this point, I don't really see myself buying the Switch 2 in the near future. Maybe next year if, the new Fire Emblem game looks really good, where I have to buy it and play it day one. But overall, I feel like it's okay to be patient when it comes to making a larger purchasing decision. And I think I mentioned this in my prior video when I talked about why I wasn't picking up the Switch 2 at launch. I don't usually buy, brand new hardware for game consoles when they come out. Like the PS5, I guess COVID was a little bit of an excuse why a lot of people couldn't get it, day one. But for me, I just wasn't even looking at it because I had, a huge library of other games that I haven't gone to on my other consoles that I was more than happy playing those before, I would invest in new hardware and, buy even more games that will go in the backlog for me. So I usually try to wait, when brand new consoles come out for the better iterations that often happen. And they kind of figure out, how to improve upon the hardware given, consumer feedback and just advances in technology. I think things will get a little bit rocky, of course, because of what we're seeing right now in tech prices and the economy in general. But, I think it's not a bad idea to wait still. So I guess in conclusion to all this, to answer the initial question I posed at the end of this video, I don't have any regrets, not picking up the Switch 2 yet. And I also probably don't see myself buying it in the next 6 months. So it might, maybe after a year, I'll buy it, especially if they have some cool limited edition ones I can't pass up if it's, representing some of my favorite IPs or whatnot. Or, maybe they'll come out with a Lite version. I really liked the Switch Lite. That was actually my first ever Switch system. I didn't buy the launch Switch 1 model. I bought the teal colored Switch Lite and eventually waited to get the Tears of the Kingdom OLED model. So I think, sometimes as a collector, as well as, a player, that didn't sound right, as well as someone who likes to play their games, I think patience is not a bad thing. And, it makes you enjoy the things you already have without, looking forward to what possibilities could be of things that, are not out yet. And I'd like to take this time to thank all of my channel members, especially my Orbman Architect members, Dr. God, Trin, and Napalm. Thank you so much for your support for my YouTube videos here, as well as my live streams. But anyway, I'd like to hear what you guys think about the Switch 2. Do you have any regrets about buying it if you bought one already? Or are you looking to buy one sometime soon? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter. If you have similar opinions or different ones, of course, love to hear it all. But until my next video, bye guys.